Welcome to the history of England from 410 AD to just before the Norman invasion of 1066. Episode 3, The Collapse, covering the Roman invasion and the Roman retreat from Britannia. The start of the story of England and the English is shrouded in more mystery today than it appeared to the Victorians. Yet here is a conundrum. There is so much more known today, albeit mostly archaeological. In 367 AD, when the Romans were still firmly in control of the southern area of what they referred to as Britannia, there was a fierce Pictish invasion. This had far-reaching repercussions, not least because it is now seen as the prelude of the decline of Roman power in Britannia. A brief resume of how we got to 367 AD might be in order. When Gaius Julius Caesar, during the narrative of his conquest of Gaul, first mentions the island of Britannia in the late summer of 55 BC, his description is of different tribes. It is not of a unified nation or sovereign state. The Britannic warriors standing on the shoreline watching Caesar's boats in the Channel approaches are not defending England. It does not exist. The various tribes are on what to the Romans was Britannia, or sometimes Albania from the Greek Albion, because they saw the white cliffs, Alba being Greek for white. Those Britons watching are aware there is a general from the mighty empire of Rome. They probably know his name, and they will have heard the stories of his conquest of Gaul. But it is only their small piece of turf they are there to defend. They have their way of life, and many are happy with it. From the Britons' viewpoint, this is purely tribal warfare. One chieftain, his clan, and a few neighbouring clans attempting to stop another tribe from landing, albeit this tribe is the mightiest empire to date. The Britons will be partly successful. Julius Caesar will depart after 2 failed attempts, but some of the Britannic tribes will be happy to do business with the Romans. In 43 AD, some of these tribes will betray others, so that the invasion by the Emperor Claudius, full name, are you ready? Tiberius Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, will succeed, and there will be over 360 years of Roman occupation. But all things end, and the Romans will start to recall its legions in 406, and by 410, the Roman part of the island, which was probably now in 5 provinces of Britannia Prima, Britannia Secunda, Flavia Caesarinacis, and Maxima Caesarinacis, and the lately incorporated Valantia, will be instructed to pay for its own defence. But while the Romans are in control, the tribal differences will be largely put aside. Trade will prosper, some people will become rich, some slaves will gain manumission, Christianity will become the prominent religion, and Britain will be an important province of Rome. One of the reasons the Romans succeeded as an empire was because it subsumed tribal factions. It didn't matter where one originated. If you were made a Roman citizen, your origins were of little importance. You were either Roman and belonged to the Roman Empire, or you were a barbarian, which meant you were not a Roman. It was strictly monocultural. One dressed and behaved as a Roman and took on Roman culture, or you were barbarian. On the other side of the coin, yes, people referred to the Germanic tribes, but only when they insisted on being barbarian, in other words, not adopting Roman ways. Likewise the Jews in Palestine having such difficulties. If you behaved and dressed like a Roman, one was a Roman. The Romans were efficient, which led to wealth and affluence, which leads to a drop in the numbers in a household, which leads to slow or no population growth. Outside the empire, the population seems to have grown as one would expect, slowly but consistently. This eventually leads to overpopulation and marginal land being found. Any poor harvests on poor land led to starvation. Inside the empire, minor but continual improvements of farming techniques were enjoyed. Inside, there was only the occasional widespread famine, and the large estates cultivated only the most productive land. And where one part of the empire was in shortage due to a poor harvest, another could supplement the shortages, and the middlemen who took the profit were richer. And as a consequence, more people were employed, and these in turn were wealthier and hence had less children. Outside the empire, there were few or no middlemen, which means less efficiency and more starvation. Numerous things led to the decline of power within the empire, and pressures from outside became too much. From the late 4th century onwards, the Western Roman Empire's fate was sealed. With rising costs of the military and a consequent increase in taxation, the financial pressures became critical. In the West, which was administered from Rome, these pressures were magnified as parts of the empire were lost, and consequently the tax revenues declined. Added to this was the scandal that the super-rich usually avoided paying any taxes. This was supported by the Senate, who also didn't pay any taxes. The upshot was that the diminishing middle classes bore the brunt of tax revenues. This in itself increased the resentment of those middle classes against rule from Rome, or, should be more accurate, rule from the northern coastal city of Ravenna, which is where the emperors had moved their court, from where they instructed the government in Rome what to do. After the initial attack on Britannia by the Picts in 367, the Romans under Theodosius retaliated and restored some order. But in 398 there is further trouble from the Picts. By this time the Picts were plundering as far as the Midlands from the north, and the 33 Roman cities within Britain were organising themselves to repulse further incursions. However, this appears to have been organised on a local level. In fact, the archaeological evidence suggests that many of the cities were already largely deserted. There had been an uprising, and the legions had supported a general in 406 who styled himself Constantine III. He had led his army into Gaul to suppress an invasion by the Germanic tribes. With the withdrawal of the legions in 406 under Constantine III, or perhaps just curtailment of being paid, this will immediately have affected the revenue and affluence of the population of Britannia, not least the loss of coinage in circulation. One moment there is a money society, next there isn't. Whilst the currency still in circulation would still have been accepted, it would, under normal circumstances, have increased in value by scarcity. However, within the empire it was being debased by continually adding less valuable metals and by increasing the amount of coinage in circulation. This led to inflation through the Roman provinces, but also to a lack of confidence in the coins. Confidence is what ensures money is accepted at its value. A lack of confidence would play havoc with precisely how much value could be attached to the coins. Money is only a token. Its value is an abstract notion. Confidence is required to hold its value. Lose the confidence and value is lost. Where the currency is scarce and so should rise in value, the lack of confidence over time will have done the opposite, so it devalued. This in turn leads to a lack of trade due to a lack of this neutral token that is a store of value. And these tokens circulating should have stability of value. Although economists refer to Roman coinage as commodity money, it can quite easily become fiat currency if there is the confidence. At this time, there was no confidence, so no value to the coins. And here comes the killer. A lack of money affects the poor more than the rich. The rich always have things, whether jewellery, farm animals, land, etc. The poor just have a store of value, money in the form of coins. With a lack of coins, or money in circulation, the poor are effectively destitute. Within the empire, there had been a long period of high inflation, but with little or no growth, resulting in what is called stagflation. Thus, in Britain, there would be a return to what, on the face of it, appears to be a simpler system of bartering and money in kind. This is not a simpler system, and is actually harder to use because the medium of money is not being circulated as a levelling factor or oil in trade. The lack of the token we call money makes the poor poorer, and the rich are the least affected. The rich always have things, and things have value, whether jewellery, oxen or whatever. In other words, people, especially the poor, are no longer working for the neutral token called money. They are working for food, shelter and clothing, or a portion of the good produced, but not being paid with a token of money that could be used elsewhere, so the poor have little stored value. What value there is held in manufactured goods or artefacts, not in a neutral token of fiat money. And also the reduction in the volume of trade obviously reduces the wealth of the individuals over and above the lack of coinage in circulation. There is also the added pressure of a lack of coincidence of needs. However, from an outside perspective, the empire still has great wealth worth plundering, especially if the country you are coming from is utilising all available farm resources, including the most marginal of agricultural land that the current technology can work. The Romans still had reading and writing. This adds to wealth in the form of knowledge. The invaders little realising that without being able to read and write, they are destroying value. In this situation, when barbarians are experiencing some lean years, any persons living comfortably can be envied. Let us remember that the Romans were, in comparison to those outside, loaded, opulent, flush. Choose your own adjective, but when it comes to extreme wealth, the Romans had it. So even after 38 years of the legions had scampered back home, there were probably still comparative riches in abundance. The glassmaking, ceramics, metalworking would still be carried on, if at a greatly reduced rate. On top of this, Britannia had rich pastures and accessible mineral resources. It can also be argued that the lands the future English population came from were harder to work than those they found in England. Plus, all the booty from the manufactured goods added to spoils aplenty. A note on the population in the 5th century. 447, there was a plague, possibly bubonic, that swept the Roman Empire. This affected Britannia as well, thus reducing further what was probably an underpopulated island. Tied in with this is the idea that the Britons were still trading with the empire via Armorica, modern Brittany, which would account for the spread of the disease. The Picts from Ireland were raiding further along the coast and inland, probably for similar reasons to the Anglo Saxons were looking for easy pickings. The Britons had no fighting experience. It was a job that had always been carried out by the Roman legions, so it makes sense that the Britons asked for professional help. Just below modern Ramsgate is Ebbsfleet, and it is here that Hengist and Horsa landed, having been invited by one of the Britons. His name is Vortigern, although this might well be what he decided he should be called, because Vortigern is probably not a given name, and might well have been the equivalent of the later Bretwalda. It translates as Great Chief or Mighty Chief. And he rode up. In 449, he invites some Jutes, or possibly Frisians, called Hengist and Horsa to fight the Picts, thus starting the main thrust of the Anglo Saxon invasions. The conquest was always thought to be along strictly tribal lines. The Angles, Saxons and Jutes invading from northern Europe and with what is now called ethnic cleansing, slaughtering the indigenous Britons and driving them across the country to Wales and establishing the English language and English customs in about 100 years. There has recently been a problem with this tidy answer. The archaeology does not quite concur, and the genetics are looking increasingly shaky for this theory. But to relate the drama in more detail, we must just sketch in the scraps of the preceding centuries. In the late 4th century, the legions proper were withdrawn from Britannia. These were needed to defend other areas closer to the Italian peninsula. By 406, the legions paid for by the central government were all withdrawn. 4 years later, a letter sent by the Emperor Honorius in 410 saying the provinces within the island of Britannia would have to fend for themselves. If you found this gradely, please click the like button and also recommend us to others. And please click the subscribe button and ring that bell to get a weekly reminder of new videos. I will be posting new videos weekly. Thank you.